Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Lilac Gaming Podcast, a podcast in which I ramble incoherently about games until I run out of things to talk about. So it hasn't been that long since E3 2016. Of course, E3 is really the main gaming news event of the year. It's certainly where there is the largest body of new stuff to talk about happening all at once. And as with every E3, there has been some good, some bad, and a lot of excruciatingly embarrassing this year. However, I'm not going to focus really on the classic PR fails, which usually dominate these kind of conferences. Mainly just going to focus on the stuff which I actually enjoyed. That way I'll keep this to a minimum length and keep it not too negative, not too critical. So, for that reason, I'm going to talk about Bethesda. Of course, Bethesda, for anyone who watches my channel, probably know that that was going to be always going to be the thing which I was going to be looking forward to the most. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk through some of the stuff that they showed at their press conference. Bearing in mind that I had to watch the conference a couple of times because I stayed up to watch it live, and living in England, it meant that it started at around about 3:15 a.m. So by the time it started, I was basically falling asleep in my chair. So I stayed up very, very late to watch the Dishonored 2 gameplay reveal. I wasn't disappointed, although I was slightly delirious, so I had to go to bed and then watch it again in the morning to make sure that I didn't dream it. So first of all, they showed Prey. Now this was something that was rumoured to be shown and to be re-revealed at this press conference, and was. So the brief history of Prey is that it was a 2004 first-person shooter for PC and I believe Xbox. It was one of those vaporware things which was in development hell for a ridiculous amount of time. It changed engine, it was shown and reshown and reshown. I think it was probably first announced in the 90s. It was one of those things like Duke Nukem Forever where it just became like a running joke. Will this game ever actually come out, you know? It came out in 2004, and it was pretty good, as I recall. It was a bit of a curiosity, really. I remember it being wonderful to look at. It was one of the several first-person shooters in 2004 which were mind-blowingly ahead of everything else in terms of graphics. Of course, that same year we had what did we have? Doom 3, Half-Life 2, of course, Thief Deadly Shadows. It was the first sort of instance of really good dynamic ranged lighting and that kind of thing in games. Ragdoll physics was new and that sort of stuff, and so Prey was up there with the prettiest games ever when it was released, and did some very interesting things with like manipulating gravity and things, so you could like walk on the walls and flip gravity round. It was pretty good fun, but it was no classic. It was one of those things that was kind of just, no one really knew what it was supposed to be. You know, like it was a sci-fi first-person shooter starring a Native American who was abducted from a truck stop diner or something and tried to escape an alien spaceship. And it's just pretty odd. And it's also extremely obscure now. It's not on Steam or GOG, so you'd have to track it down on eBay or something if you wanted to try it out. But it's not a bad game by any means. Anyway, it came out, it was reasonably well received, then the IP went quiet for years. Now, in about 2011 or 12, I can't remember exactly when, Prey 2 was announced. And it wasn't a sequel to Prey at all in terms of story. It was like a completely new thing, and it blew people away. There was a gameplay demonstration shown at something like E3, and it was like, what was shown was a seemingly open-world, Blade Runner-style science fiction city inhabited by tons of different alien races, with a real sort of gritty crime wave gangster, like Blade Runner or like Coruscant from Star Wars Episode 2. And it was like you play as a bounty hunter who's chasing his mark through a crowded city with all these crazy alien races and like this rainy sci-fi city with neon lights like Blade Runner, and it just looked fantastic. And it was revealed and shown off and hyped, and then it went quiet, and it continued to be quiet, and nothing else was ever shown. It was then revealed sometime later that the developer, had gone under, and revealed sometime later still that the IP of Prey had been acquired by Bethesda. It was then rumoured, I can't remember whether or not it was actually confirmed officially, I think it was, that the Prey IP had been handed over to Arcane, who of course are the developers behind Dishonored, Arx Fatalis, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. Very, very good developer who are themselves now parented by Bethesda. And the Prey IP, well, Raphael Colantonio, who was the founding member of Arcane, he founded the company in Lyon in France. The Lyon studio is now helmed by Harvey Smith, and they have been working, of course, on Dishonored 2, which is out this November. Raphael Colantonio went to Austin, Texas to start Arcane Austin, which is their second studio, and was working on a top secret project, which was top secret up until this conference. He then revealed it to be Prey. Not Prey 2, but Prey, a reboot of the IP, which is itself nothing to do with the original Prey from 2004. Nor is it anything to do with the open world Blade Runner bounty hunter thing. Now, obviously a lot of people are going to be pissed off that Blade Runner bounty hunter thing is gone and it's not coming back. And that is a real shame, because that looked like it was going to be a super fun game. However, what Colantonio has shown us, the new Prey, is basically a System Shock style psychological sci-fi horror shooter. So, yeah, 2 thumbs up from me. Raphael Colantonio actually has said that he started Arcane originally with the sole intention of making what he described as first-person immersive games, which is like games in the Looking Glass style. Games with deep storytelling juxtaposed with extremely flexible like gameplay and player freedom. Games like System Shock, Deus Ex, the Thief games, Ultima Underworld, Bioshock, and so on. And of course, Arcane made Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, Arx Fatalis, and Dishonored, and now they have Prey as well. And we only got a cinematic trailer, as is standard practice for these kind of things, but we are going to see gameplay at QuakeCon in August, and I am very excited, because even the cinematic trailer showed some very promising themes. It was basically like a psychological Groundhog Day kind of horror with a science fiction city. A guy wakes up on a spaceship where everything's fucked up. It had like a bit where he was shooting these dark alien creatures with a shotgun. It looked like it was going to be a pretty sweet System Shocky type of game. So that has rocketed up to near the top of my list of most anticipated forthcoming games. That's Prey. Next up is Skyrim Special Edition. This was another thing which was heavily rumoured from the same source to be revealed at this conference, and of course it was by Todd Howard, Little Todd, who after E3 said that of course Elder Scrolls 6 is going to happen in the future, but then he said it's a long way off. We don't even know if the technology that's currently available is going to be able to do what we want to do with the Elder Scrolls. And then someone else, I think it was Pete Hines or someone from Bethesda, said the Elder Scrolls 6 is not in development right now, and basically it's going to be years away, which is what I expected. It's usually between 4 and 6 years in between Bethesda RPGs. They like to take their time with it, and I am fine with that. I don't want a big Bethesda RPG to come out every 2 years or every year. I don't want them to do an Assassin's Creed with it, where basically they're churning this shit out so much that they don't even bother to finish what they're doing or stop to work out what they're even fucking doing at all. Now, Bethesda RPGs, of course, have a lot of problems. They always do. But they are big projects that people spend years on, and people spend years playing them, and the quality shows, you know? So, in the meantime, they've tried to sort of satiate the fans with Skyrim Special Edition, which is something that I had already predicted was going to happen, in the same way they did Dishonored Definitive Edition for PS4 and Xbox One. They are re-releasing Skyrim with all its expansion content, all its DLC, for PS4 and Xbox One, and it has remastered graphics, which includes new light shaders, better texture work and colour filters, and volumetric god rays. They showed that, so that's something to look forward to. Yes, official volumetric god rays patch. Now, I'm assuming this is going to be a budget price thing when it comes out on console, which is fine by me. Obviously, even though this is just going to be a huge money-making operation for them, it's fucking Bethesda. They're one of the big publishing companies, so of course everything they do is motivated by money. These aren't indie game developers. Their game projects have budgets of like tens of millions of dollars. So it's understandable that they would like shovel this stuff out again on the current generation. Skyrim is a huge game, and if they released it at £20, $30, whatever it is, on PS4, Xbox One, people with those consoles would probably be very happy buying it again. Now, the thing that's really good about this from my point of view is that if you own Skyrim and all of its expansion content on Steam, they will drop the special edition graphical update as a free patch. So that is awesome for me, because I have Skyrim installed anyway. It just means that when the special edition is released, it's just going to auto-patch itself with an official graphical overhaul, which is amazing. So I was planning to start a small themed and contained Skyrim series on my channel. So now I'm just going to wait until the special edition so that I can do it with the official graphics upgrade. And that's all good with me. Next is Fallout 4. They showed the final sets of DLC which are coming in the expansion pass. Sorry, the season pass. And I mean, I like Fallout 4 quite a bit, but I am one of the majority of people who will say quite openly that it has enough problems. Now, those problems, a lot of them were addressed by the fantastic Far Harbor add-on, and we are getting one more substantially sized add-on, the very final piece of DLC, which is Nuka World, which is like a Nuka-Cola theme park that's been turned into a raider city, and the player can actually themselves become a raider and like raid their own settlements and stuff, which is an awesome idea. The Far Harbor DLC I thought was absolutely fantastic, and to date the best bit of Fallout 4. However, of course, Bethesda increased the price of their season pass, claiming that they were going to basically add a ton more DLC content than they said they were initially going to. Now, bear in mind that we essentially have 2 major expansions and several not major expansions. I'm struggling to accept that the higher price for the season pass is worth it for everything. You know, I like expansions for games. I like expansion packs in the old style, in the old school sense, like Blood Moon for Morrowind or Shivering Isles for Oblivion. To me, that's what an expansion pack is. It's a landmass, it's a whole new storyline with a whole new bunch of side quests, equipment, new enemies, new characters, somewhere which is completely separate and distinct from the main game. Far Harbor is exactly that. Nuka World looks like it's going to be that, but that's it. So, the season pass costs the same as the game at retail. I don't think it's worth it. Basically, just doing the number crunching. You know, you're not getting enough content, basically. And all the other DLC packs are just like shitty little things where you can make machines that roll balls down tracks to, like, start flamethrowers up in your settlements. And I really, honestly don't like the settlement building stuff in Fallout 4. It's a nice idea in principle, but it's just like they're piggybacking on this whole Minecraft crafting survival craze. And it's just not really that fun to me. I prefer the post-apocalyptic role-playing game. I don't like the fucking, like, putting your settlers to work growing carrots and stuff. It's just not that good. I mean, it's fun for a bit, but too much of the game is focused on that. Focused on picking up all, like, bits of rubbish that you find lying around and crunching them down into base materials to build things with. It just doesn't really keep my attention for that long, but there it is, you know. I'm hoping Nuka World is going to be great, though. Okay, next is Quake. Quake has just celebrated its 20th anniversary, amazingly. In fact, that actually makes sense to me when I think back to the age that I was when Quake was released. Anyway, Quake, the original Quake, is my favourite Quake game to this day. And Machine Games, the studio behind the excellent Wolfenstein The New Order and Wolfenstein The Old Blood, they have just released a new episode of Quake for free on the internet. That is fucking awesome, man. You can download for free like a brand new entire episode of several levels for the original Quake, compatible with the Quake Steam release. And what's more, it is awesome. It's some of the best Quake levels I've ever played. They've really, like, done everything that they can with the original Quake engine, with the way that, like, you know, just the way that the levels are designed is so intuitive. You have, like, branching paths that go off to have, like, multiple objectives and that kind of thing, and the way it introduces the different enemies, packs of enemies and that sort of thing. It's really good. It's really well designed. If you have any interest in first-person shooters, you should definitely track down and play the Machine Games Quake episode. It's like John Romero was earlier this year releasing some brand new Doom WODs, wasn't he? Basically just to promote his failed Kickstarter for a new first-person shooter. But then Machine Games go and quietly drop a Quake episode, and it is so much fun. Definitely go and play that. And talking of Quake, Bethesda announced Quake Champions. So obviously with the success of the new Doom, and the new Doom is very, very cool, deserves to be a success. I think it's certainly far, far better than I was expecting it to be. Really, really good and worthy of the Doom name. So following the success of their 2016 Doom reboot, they are now dropping Quake, a brand new game called Quake Champions, which is, well, it's Overwatch, isn't it? Let's face it, it's Overwatch. It's a multiplayer arena shooter Quake, so like Quake 3 Arena type of thing, but with individual, unique and distinct characters. So it has the original Quake guy, which I am very happy about, and the original Quake guy looks awesome in the new cinematic trailer. But the guy from id had to clarify after the conference what Quake Champions it actually is. He was saying it's a twitch reflex, super fast paced, run and gun, rocket jump, multiplayer arena deathmatch shooter. Now that is exactly what we want, really. I mean, I wouldn't have minded a new single player Quake campaign, but after Quake 4, not so keen. But an arena Quake shooter like Quake 3, brought up to date with the id Tech engine, is cool. I don't really like the idea of them sort of trying to jump on the Overwatch Team Fortress bandwagon, which they appear to be doing, but you know, I'm quietly optimistic about Quake Champions. I'm assuming we'll see more of that at QuakeCon in August as well. But After the multiplayer in the new Doom, which is frankly mediocre, I actually kind of feel like focusing an entire game on the multiplayer side of it is a good idea for them, because the multiplayer in Doom 2016 kind of feels like an afterthought. The single player campaign in that game is stunning, amazing, so well designed and just the right length, but the multiplayer is kind of balls, frankly. Elder Scrolls Online, they announced a pretty major update for Elder Scrolls Online, which is called something like Tamriel Unlocked, or some stupid name like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they are basically removing the area walls, the level cap, meaning that you can freely traverse the entire of the game world with any character at any level, rather than being tied to the areas of your faction and that kind of thing. That's a very, very good idea. I don't know whether it's enough to drag me back into the Elder Scrolls Online. Not hugely fond of that game, but I do actually like it quite a bit, considering that I am someone who doesn't actually like MMOs. I've put a fair few hours into it, and I do dip in every now and then. I do think it's a really nice game with good production values and really nice graphical style and stuff like that. I do want to try some of the expansion stuff as well, like the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood stuff, which I have not tried, but overall, it's looking like they sort of are supporting that game in the right ways, you know? They're doing the very best they can to keep it interesting, or as interesting as it ever was, which is debatable. There you go. And finally, Dishonored 2. Ooh yeah. The main event. Man, I'm so excited for that game. It looks like everything that I hoped a Dishonored sequel would be, and a ton more besides. It's built on a modified id Tech engine, so the engine of the new Doom, I believe, but heavily modified. They're calling it the Void engine, and the graphical direction just looks like the perfect realization of the original Dishonored's art style. All the character design especially has been so well improved. The really grotesque, messed up pig faces on the guards, but down to the really, really sort of angular and very stylized European looking faces on like the female characters. Very sharp cheekbones and sharp chins and that kind of thing. Looks so great. So great. The game is set in Karnaka, on the southern island of Serkonos. Harvey Smith said they wanted to set the game as far away as they could from the aesthetic of Dunwall, which is that's a sensible decision, but what's very interesting is that the game actually starts and ends in Dunwall. Now, we got our first look at Dishonored 2's gameplay, and that first look was basically divided into like 3 or 4 kind of separate parts. Without really saying what we were going to see, Harvey Smith said, "Here is your first look at Dishonored 2's gameplay." Or he said, like, the first look at the world of Dishonored 2 or something like that. And I'd been up for so long and I was falling asleep. I was like in the middle of the night. I was like, here we go, on the edge of my seat. And basically we got a slow-moving montage of different landscapes of the game. It was like the camera just panning across bits of scenery from Karnaka with like guards patrolling around, people sat on chairs smoking cigars and that kind of thing. And then that was it, and it went back to him, and I was like, oh, that can't be it. Please tell me that's not it. I stayed up so fucking long to watch like 30 seconds of like establishing atmosphere shots. But then he continued to talk about it, and each thing that he talked in depth about, he then showed in the game. So we saw like 4 different bits. The first bit, of course, was like just the setting, which is what I was talking about. The next bit was scenes from the intro of the game. Now, of course, in Dishonored 2, you can play as Corvo from the first game, but he's like 50 this time. It's set like 15 years later or 20 years later or something. No, it's 15 years later, isn't it? So Emily is 25. Corvo is like 50 or something. And so you can play as Corvo or Emily. Now, the way that they've done this is quite ingenious, because you start the game, the intro is played through Emily's eyes. So you walk into Dunwall Tower as Emily, with Corvo walking beside you. Emily is, of course, Empress by this point. And then something happens, which is horrible. And then basically it cuts to a bit where Corvo and Emily are stood back to back, facing off against these attackers. And you can choose one of them to control. That person you then control for the entire remainder of the game. So you can't like choose which of them you are going to control for each mission or anything like that. You pick one of them at the beginning and you play the entire game as that character, which of course promotes like good replayability, and not that Dishonored ever needed much replayability that it didn't already have. It's one of the most replayable games of its kind. This time it has that tenfold. Not only are there more endings, there are more options for playing, both lethal and non-lethal. And of course, Corvo and Emily both have their own unique, completely unique sets of powers. So if you play as Corvo, you have all of his abilities from the original Dishonored, like Blink, Dark Vision, and Possession, and that kind of thing. But not only are they upgradable like in Dishonored, they're upgradable further. So they're upgradable with a tree. So of course in Dishonored you had like 2 stages of upgrade for each power. You had like Blink 1, and then you had Blink 2, which lets you blink further. You have Possession 1, which lets you possess animals, and then Possession 2, which lets you possess people, that kind of thing. In Dishonored 2, you can kind of perk up each of the powers in ways that you can choose yourself. For example, with Possession, you can upgrade it so that you can possess corpses. So that if you're being chased, you can possess a corpse, and then the enemies will like kick the corpse to see if it's alive, but it's not, it's a corpse, and you're just looking out of the corpse's eyes, and you can't be detected. So that's a really nice feature as well. But with Emily, you have a completely different set of powers. Now, I think they might share some, like Dark Vision, but most of them are completely unique to each character. So instead of Blink, Emily has something called Far Reach, where like a ghostly arm extends out of her arm, and whereas Blink is like a teleport, Far Reach is just like a zoom. So she doesn't go invisible when she teleports, she just like rushes past people and they can still see her, which isn't quite as good, but it does enable you to grab far off objects and bring them towards you, or even people. You can like grab a guy, send him flying through the air towards you, and then he lands impaled on Emily's sword, which is pretty fucking cool. Emily also has powers including one called Domino, which they've been showing off, which shows like the extreme potential for improvisation and like unique scenarios in Dishonored 2. Domino is something where you can tag enemies with this domino power, and like a glowing sort of orb thing appears around their head, which shows they've been marked with domino. And then if you do something to one of the marked enemies, the effect of what you do happens to all of the other ones simultaneously. So you mark like 3 guys, and then you shoot one of them in the face, they all get shot in the face. Or like if there's a guard stood on a balcony looking over the edge, you can push him over the edge, and then all of the other ones who are marked go flying as well in like whatever direction they're facing. So it looks like some hilarious things can be set up using that power. Emily also has stun mines, which you can like put on the wall, one of the new non-lethal options. It basically like gives someone within its proximity an electric shock and knocks them unconscious. She has a power called Mesmerize, which creates this very strange looking sort of spiky ball of matter which floats in the air, and any enemy or animal who is near it is just so fixated with it that it like wipes their memory and they can't notice you walking past and they don't know anything that's happened. That looks very cool as well, but a little cheap, I've got to say. But again, it looks very good for non-lethal options. Harvey Smith has also said that the non-lethal options are going to be greatly expanded and focused on in Dishonored 2. There is, for example, a non-lethal drop takedown now. Of course, the drop assassination in Dishonored, you can drop on someone's head from a great height and then like kill them instantly by landing on them and stabbing them. But there is no way of doing that without killing them. In Dishonored 2, you can. There is a non-lethal drop takedown. You can also pull guys over like railings and balconies from underneath. Lots of very cool things, and the guards themselves this time can actually look up and they can chase you. The guards can climb walls, they can vault over obstacles, much more like Assassin's Creed where you can be chased up onto the rooftops by guards. That kind of thing is now in Dishonored 2. Karnaka has much more of a focus on vertical space, and it's in the section of the Dust District that they showed in the demonstration that is done to extremely dramatic effect. She goes out over a balcony, she can see the whole city spread out below her. The buildings that she's scaling are so tall, and when she gets to the top, she continues to climb up this huge wind turbine which is powering a wall of light and shuts it down, and she's so high up by the end of it. The altitude is just incredible and the graphics look so great. And of course, because Karnaka is like, whereas Dunwall is based on London and Edinburgh, it's like smoky and grey and cloudy and sooty. Karnaka is like based on coastal cities in France, Italy, Greece, Spain. It's like very more into Central Europe rather than the UK. So it's like sunny climate, whitewashed walls, dust storms, palm trees, and it looks so bright and colourful. Let's see, what else can I say about... Oh, the other thing they showed, which is very cool, is that a lot of the missions in Dishonored 2 are going to have like a unique MacGuffin in them, like a unique mechanic which is only used in one mission. The example of this they showed is a mission where you are exploring a ruined mansion which has been marked by an ancient magic, and the outsider gives you this occult timepiece which you can pull it out, and you're walking around this ruined mansion. There is no one in it. A lot of the corridors and doorways are like blocked off by fallen masonry and that kind of thing. But then you open up this timepiece and it gives you like a little window above it, and when you look through this window you can see what it was like hundreds of years ago. You can see guards patrolling around, you can see all of the mansion like decorated beautifully, but just through this little vignette that you're holding in your hand. And then you can step through the window into the past where the guards can see you and the guards are on patrol and you have to hide. And then you can like kill one of them or take one of them down, step back out into the present day and watch through the little vignette while the other ones notice him and freak out and stuff. It looks so neat. And you have to like step into the past to get through a blocked doorway and then step back out into the present day, and you're like affecting things in the past to change the future and that kind of thing. It looks really nice, man. Really unique and like so much fun and just so beautiful and well designed. And what else? There's a couple more things. Oh yes, Harvey Smith has also clarified there was an achievement in Dishonored called Mostly Flesh and Steel, which was to beat the entire game without purchasing or using any enhancements or powers. And Dishonored 2 now has that as a full-blown feature. Regardless of whether you choose to play as Corvo or Emily, at the beginning of the game when you visit the outsider or are visited by the outsider, and he gives you his mark or whatever and allows you to take powers, you have the option to straight up refuse, which means that for the entire rest of the game, you have no powers and no option to have any powers. You just have to stealth it like you're playing one of the Thief games or something like that. That's amazing. I mean, obviously, like, the Dishonored games are a quality playground of amazing situations and mechanics, but one thing that will definitely bring me back to play this game multiple times is to do a Flesh and Steel run, where you have no powers. You just have to sneak around and take people out, hide them in cupboards and that kind of thing. Yes, definitely gets my seal of approval. And finally, the last thing I'll say about Dishonored 2 is the antagonist is Delilah Copperspoon, which is amazing. I mean, she was my favourite thing about the story of Dishonored, or rather the story of its expansions. I found her to be far more of an interesting and evil and powerful and strangely likeable villain than any of the ones in the main story of Dishonored. I haven't actually to date done the Knife of Dunwall or the Brigmore Witches on my channel, but I'm getting round to those very soon. However, I really liked Delilah, and when they ended the presentation with the gameplay trailer for Dishonored 2, and it showed Delilah like infiltrating Dunwall Tower and like touching up Corvo, and then he stabs her with his sword, and it has this cool shot of her like just slowly pulling his sword out of her and holding it out like she does with Dowd. And then in the special collector's edition of the game, you get several little tatty trinkets, but you also get a cool propaganda poster, which is our new Empress Delilah Coldwin or something like that. So she's calling herself Delilah Coldwin, presumably to finally get revenge on Jessamine Coldwin, who she resented by taking Emily's place. Now, of course, we don't really know anything at this point, but purely speculation, as we know the game does start and end in Dunwall. I kind of get the impression that when we go back to Dunwall at the end of the game, she's going to have really, really messed it up and turned it into a proper dystopia, you know, where she has like absolute power there and stuff. So that was the thing that really got me most excited of all, was seeing Delilah as the supernatural villainess. And yeah, she's such a good character, and I can't wait to see more of that. So that is Dishonored 2. Whew, finally got that done. That is also Bethesda's press conference. What else can I say from E3? Ubisoft. Yeah. You know they say like old habits die hard, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks or whatever. You can't have an E3 without Ubisoft's excruciatingly out of touch and amazingly lame press conferences. And this one might have been the most embarrassing yet. Like, holy fuck. It started off with some kind of crazy dance routine with like people in costumes and stuff, and the main like MC was this woman who just kept like pointlessly and glaringly swearing and stuff, like just thinking that she was going to get herself in touch with the audience by doing it. And it was so shit. Like, the audience were just a load of gamers and games journalists who were sat there waiting to see footage of Ubisoft's newest titles. But it was this woman, like, trying to hype up the crowd like it was some sort of teenage sort of, I don't even know, I can't describe it, but it's well worth checking out on YouTube, the Ubisoft press conference, or indeed any of their E3 press conferences. They always show themselves up to misunderstand reality in pretty dramatic ways. However, they showed South Park: The Fractured But Whole, and that game was shown by South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone, Big heroes of mine, and I'm very much looking forward to that game. I love The Stick of Truth, and I do love South Park a great deal. That game looks like a markable improvement from The Stick of Truth, and again, I actually predicted this myself. When me and my girlfriend were playing The Stick of Truth when it came out, I was actually saying to her, they should do a game like this, but with the Coonham friends, with like the superheroes from South Park. That should be the sequel. And look what they did. So I'm taking credit for the Fractured Butthole. It was my idea, and I'm in contact with my attorney, seeing if I can get any kind of legal redress from Ubisoft. Anyway, what about that game? It has a grid system now in the combat. You can control 4 kids at a time rather than 2, like in The Stick of Truth. You can play as a girl now, which is awesome. You can choose boy or a girl. You have 3 character classes unlocked at the beginning of the game, but you unlock more, and you can also combine multiple classes at once. Your superhero character has to have an origin story created for them by Cartman, which in the demonstration they showed is your superhero character is like fucked up because he saw his mum and dad having sex or something like that. It's funny. It's South Park. I don't really know many people who don't like South Park. But if you like South Park, then you're going to like that. Nothing else from Ubisoft really interested me. Watch Dogs 2, hell no. That looks really, really mediocre, really uncreative, and just generally pure meh. The other thing was they showed footage from some sort of multiplayer Ghost Recon game, and it had like fake party chat over the top of it, but it was so bad that I couldn't work out watching the demonstration whether or not it was like in the game or whether or not it was supposed to be party chat. It sounded like either the least convincing fake party chat ever, which is what it actually turned out to be, or the absolute worst voice acting I've ever heard in any video game. But it was so bad. Like, you've got to track down that demo and watch it just to see how, like, exactly the wrong ways to demonstrate a game that you're trying to sell to people. That was it. That really was. So that was Ubisoft. EA. Yeah. Oh dear. Now, Ubisoft, their conference was terrible, but EA's was worse purely because it was fucking boring, and that's really unforgivable. I mean, Ubisoft was like hopelessly out of touch and pretty embarrassing and stuff, but at least it was like colourful and energetic. EA's was just like so dull, and all the games they showed were grey and dull and boring. Titanfall 2, like, one of the most boring things I've ever seen, ever. Isn't a trailer supposed to, like, show you the most exciting and energetic moments of the game, all, like, cut together really well with some epic music, so that you feel like, yeah, that looks like an action-packed feast? Well, Titanfall 2, I mean, you could actually, like, get babies to fall asleep by playing them that trailer. Anyway, that was awful. FIFA The Journey. Wow. Now, that actually looks like, if you like FIFA, it might turn out to be a pretty fun game. But, like, a football game with a dramatic, emotional story. Like, come on. I'm not like 10 years old and thick. Do you know what I mean? Now, I have to admit that I don't actually like football at all, and don't like football games either. I'm not into FIFA and Pro. What I do like, though, I like some football games, thinking about it. I like Rocket League, I like Super Mario Strikers, I like Mega Man Soccer, I like Sensible Soccer, and I like Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe and Blood Bowl. But in terms of actual real-life football games, like FIFA and Pro Evo, I am so hugely indifferent towards them that I have to admit that FIFA The Journey actually piqued my curiosity purely because there's something about it which isn't completely mundane and excruciatingly dull. However, it did look really embarrassing and overly dramatic and like some shitty kind of low-budget TV series. But I am not their target audience, so I'm not going to be unfair about it. It does look quite interesting. Mass Effect Andromeda looks quite interesting. Not really a fan of that series, but that looks really nice. There was a very, very brief clip in the sort of making of trailer which they showed for that of a blue alien girl looking surprised at something, and the graphics looked amazing on her like facial expression. And that was that. Then there was a little montage of forthcoming Star Wars related projects from EA, including something like a new game which is being touted as Uncharted-like. And yeah, I don't like the idea of that very much. Not that I dislike Uncharted particularly, and I thought that Star Wars 1313 looked really good before they cancelled it, and that was going to be like Uncharted. But mainly because games like that, they come and go. You know, they're like the pop music of video games. You complete them in 6 hours and then you take them back to the shop and trade them in. They don't survive the test of time because they are constantly trying to be the most cinematic and graphical showcases in the most like tight, linear corridor environments. They don't give you any opportunity to replay them, and they're just kind of like, they don't really interest me particularly. It's not that I dislike games like Uncharted, I actually quite like them, but I just find them boring. You know, when there's so many games and you have such a limited amount of time to play games, I like ones which give me a set of tools and then set me free to experiment and things like that. When you get things like the Uncharted games or The Last of Us, where basically you're just walking alongside someone while they talk to you, and you're walking down a corridor from room to room, and occasionally, if you're lucky, some enemies will pop up in the room and you can duck behind some cover and take them out one by one, and then someone will start talking again, and you have to walk alongside them while they talk again. And the problem is that quite often they don't walk at the same speed as your character. They'll walk very, very slightly slower than you so that if you're behind, you can catch up to them. But if you go too far behind, they stop and wait for you, and the dialogue stops. It's like watching a film, but you have to hold a controller and control one of the characters in the film while they talk. It's just like not my bag, you know? I like things with more gameplay than that. So I'm not hugely keen on this new Star Wars thing, which is going to be Uncharted-like, because I just know exactly what it's going to be like. And they've also confirmed that Battlefront 2 is coming next year. That kind of pissed me off, because Battlefront is still not a complete game, even after all of its Season Pass content. The fact that they actually admitted that they had no... When John Boyega, who of course plays Finn in The Force Awakens, he's an awesome, awesome dude and an awesome actor. Really like funny, like good person and stuff. And he said on Twitter that he was gutted that Battlefront didn't have a single player campaign. And like he asked EA why that was or something on Twitter. And they basically, because it's John Boyega and he's so like high profile, they were forced to respond to it. And they said they actually admitted that Battlefront has no single player campaign because they wanted to get it released before The Force Awakens came out so that it could sell more. And it's like, fuck. I mean, I know EA are cunts, right? I know that. It's not like I'm acting surprised that EA do something corporate without putting the interests of the consumer, like, in mind. But that's just really shitty, you know? They admitted that the game was released half finished and that they were going to, like, support it with loads of good content to, like, pad it out until it was a proper product. And now, after, like, releasing a frankly mediocre and very expensive season pass, they're just moving on to the sequel. Just like, let's sweep it under the rug and then we'll do a sequel really, really quickly, which will probably also be, like, lacking in content and will make people pay 40 quid, $60 all over again. pretty low. The problem is that I was forced to buy Battlefront because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and it's really fun. It's really fun. I do actually still play it quite a bit, although I mainly just play Fighter Squadron. But I've probably got my money's worth. Anyway, I'm going to stop ranting about Star Wars now. So that was EA. Nintendo, they basically just did one thing, didn't they? Which was The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which looks amazing. Amazing. I'm a big Nintendo fan, big Zelda fan, but that looks amazing. They've sort of taken a lot of things from modern games, because of course Nintendo are hopelessly out of touch with the modern gaming industry. They've actually taken a lot of things from modern games, like an open world, crafting system, resource collecting, like interchangeable and upgradable equipment, and they've stuck The Legend of Zelda into that kind of mold. And it's amazing because they've actually said during the lengthy demonstrations that they wanted to go back to the original Legend of Zelda for NES. Now that is a very, very, very fucking good idea on their part, because Zelda has become so handholdy. The only modern Zelda game, Zelda game for years, which has any degree of respect for the player, is A Link Between Worlds on 3DS, which I absolutely loved. And that was very surprising when it came out, because you start a new game and you're actually in control of the character within about 10 seconds, where you compare it to something like Skyward Sword, and there's like half an hour of cutscenes before you can even control, and then you control for about 2 minutes, and then there's a further hour of cutscenes or whatever. You have to play the game for several hours even before you can enter the first dungeon. That game really did epitomise the problem with modern Zelda games, and with modern games in general, actually. It's only nowadays with things like Dark Souls and roguelikes becoming so popular that people are starting to understand that hand-holding in games is not good, or it's very overused. But Breath of the Wild looks really, really cool. My favourite moment that I saw of it, I watched extensive demonstrations, and my favourite bit is still when Link puts all of the bits of food in the frying pan and fries himself a little meal. It looks so charming. And I actually saw a comment underneath some coverage of Breath of the Wild where someone was saying, "Oh, why am I supposed to care about this? There is a whole load of better survival and crafting open world games on Steam for like budget price, and they have like dinosaurs and shit in them," presumably referring to something like Ark Survival Evolved or Rust or whatever. Like, my reaction to that is, yeah, but those games aren't finished, they aren't polished, and they're all the fucking same, and they don't have any of the charm or polish or like joy of Nintendo games about them. You're supposed to care about Zelda doing that because it's doing it in a Zelda way, not in a let's copy Ark Survival Evolved, let's copy Minecraft. They're doing it in a Nintendo way, and that is why I'm so excited for Breath of the Wild. Can't wait for that one. The other thing that Nintendo did actually show at E3 from their Treehouse broadcasts, which might have gone slightly under the radar due to Breath of the Wild, was Dragon Quest VII Fragments of the Forgotten Past for 3DS. Now, the Dragon Quest series has never really done all that well in the West. However, it is the biggest video game franchise of all time in Japan. There are so many strange ways that game series is like ingrained into their culture, to the extent that they aren't allowed to release new titles of the game on weekdays because so many people bunk off work to go and secure their copy down the game shops and stuff. It's really big there. And the fact that Dragon Quest VII is coming to 3DS, it's like a full 3D remake of Dragon Quest VII, which was originally released in 2000 on the PlayStation 1. The fact that's coming to 3DS is a big deal in a number of ways. For me personally, it's a big deal because I'm from England, and we never actually got Dragon Quest VII, or rather Dragon Warrior 7 as it was called back then. We never got that for PlayStation. That was never released in Europe or in PAL territories. It was released in the United States, and I do own an original copy of it, a US NTSC copy for PlayStation 1, which I have played through in its entirety on my PC with a PlayStation emulator. But it's a big deal because it's the first time that game is coming to PAL territories. It's also the first time that Dragon Quest VII is on a Nintendo platform, which is huge because the first 6 games in the series were all on Nintendo platforms. 1 to 4 were on the NES, 5 and 6 were on the Super Nintendo, and then they migrated to PlayStation 4, 7, and 8 was on PlayStation 2. Then they returned to Nintendo for number 9, which was on the DS, and 10, which was on the Wii, and is now on a couple of other systems as well, including iOS, PC, and Wii U, and 3DS, but that game was never released in any Western territories, mainly because it's kind of an offbeat MMO interpretation of Dragon Quest, and not really a full... It doesn't really have a single-player campaign or anything like that. Anyway, so 7 is coming out in September on the 3DS. Very, very big deal for me. I'm a huge, huge Dragon Quest fan. If everyone has like one JRPG series that they follow, mine is definitely Dragon Quest. I'm not amazingly into JRPGs, I've got to say. I like Dragon Quest a lot. What do I like? I like Golden Sun, and I like Disgaea. And that's about the only JRPG series where I will play every single one of them. I don't know if Souls counts, but I love Souls. But Dragon Quest is cool. I'm really looking forward to a modern English translation, because the modern English translations of Dragon Quest games, that is being since Dragon Quest VIII on PS2, they are so charming. Everything is like puns. For example, there's a place in the Dragon Quest games where you can go to like revocate your characters and change their character class, and it's called All Trades Abbey. And the guy who runs it is called Jack of All Trades. So that just shows you the level of punnery that we're talking about in Dragon Quest. It's like a charming Pixar kind of children's film that adults can appreciate as well. You know, it's suitable for all ages, it's very colourful, it's very optimistic, and it always lacks the emo-haired douchebags whining on about how lame they are that you get in the most other JRPGs these days. Cough, cough. Final Fantasy 15. Cough, cough. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be unnecessarily harsh on Final Fantasy 15. I'm sure it's going to be a great game. The Final Fantasy games are not for me. I find them too emo, basically. I just can't get on with the like emotional storyline and kind of gloopy anime-ness of it all. It's just not really for me. You know, I like something with a bit more punch. Anyway, yes, so that's Dragon Quest VII coming in September on 3DS. Dragon Quest VIII is also being ported to 3DS and is also getting a Western release. That's been out for a while in Japan, but Dragon Quest VIII on PS2 was the game which certainly reignited my interest in JRPGs. I think before that game came out in 2004, I hadn't played a JRPG since Golden Sun: The Lost Age on Game Boy Advance. Like I say, it's just not really a genre which interests me so much. But Dragon Quest VIII, again, is coming home to Nintendo. First time that game has ever been on a Nintendo platform, which means that now every single Dragon Quest game is available on a Nintendo system. And that's very, very nice. Also, the SNES-inspired mobile remakes of Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 have been out on Western iOS and I think Android stores for a while now as well, and I recommend checking those out. I don't really play mobile games at all, but I have been putting a lot of time into Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 on iPhone. It controls so well on a touchscreen, and it has, of course, the modern style charming translation. So yes, very much recommend checking those out. And finally, Dragon Quest Builders, which is Dragon Quest's version of Minecraft. It's the Dragon Quest developers cashing in on the monumental success of things like Minecraft, and it's a voxel-based construction game set in the world of Dragon Quest 1 with its own kind of storyline where you have to build up little villages in the world of Alefgard and like kind of save the villagers, and it has like some sort of storyline about it. But I always kind of thought there was a reasonable chance of that one coming west because it's Minecraft inspired, and Minecraft is obviously meteoric in the Western world. But when a new Dragon Quest game is announced, it's always completely touch and go whether we will ever get it released in English. And it really feels like we are being treated very well by the Dragon Quest developers now, especially with Dragon Quest VII for 3DS, considering that is by far and away the longest Dragon Quest game and one of if not the longest JRPGs of all time. It takes well over 100 hours to complete the main story, and there are something like 1 million lines of dialogue in the game. It's extraordinarily large. I once saw a photo online of the Dragon Quest VII script, handwritten in the... not handwritten, but in like printed out in folders in the Square Enix offices. And it's like an entire bookshelf is just the script for this one game. So I'm going to be sinking a ton of time into that on the go. What's really, really unfortunate as well is that I'm going on holiday the week before that game is released. How bad is that for timing? Like, it's exactly the kind of game that you would want to take on holiday with you and just, you know, like when you're sat on a plane or whatever and you're bored for a few hours, pop out the old 3DS and shred some Dragon Quest, man. Grind some monsters and stuff. It's so much fun. Such a cool little game series, and really, really love like the charm of it and the polish. So I'm super happy for that. And also for Dragon Quest Builders, which I am looking at with curiosity. I'm certainly going to buy it day one. I just have to show my support for that series. And yeah, so that was the other thing that Nintendo showed at E3. Let's see. Hideo Kojima showed Death Stranding, which is the first game by his new independent Kojima Productions studio since he bailed from the sinking ship that is Konami. So, after Konami unceremoniously cancelled PT, or rather Silent Hills, as it was going to be, he and Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead have teamed up again for a brand new game called Death Stranding. And I'm assuming that is supposed to be some sort of clever, in inverted commas, pun. Like stranding, like as in you're stranded, and stranding as in there are strands like of something connecting these things together, which is why there were a lot of like that sort of theme in the teaser. But basically my reaction to Death Stranding is, what the fuck is Death Stranding supposed to be? I don't even think they know what it's supposed to be. All I saw was like a fucking weird music video where Norman Reedus was walking naked across the moon, and there were dead whales everywhere, and he was like attached to a baby by a cable and crying, and there was some like weird song. We don't know anything about the game. We don't know anything about what they're trying to achieve with it. It's just that if you allow Hideo Kojima total creative freedom over a project, then his pretension levels will hit such an unspeakable high that something like this will be allowed to happen. Now, I'd be surprised if this ends up being a game at all. He'll probably just try and transcend his own body and put his brain into a jar or something. Sorry, I'm being a bit petulant, but Hideo Kojima is one of the most, like, irritatingly pretentious people on the face of the earth. And it really annoys me sometimes when that side of him comes across too much in his games, because he is a brilliant game designer and like one of the best. So it really annoys me playing something like one of the Metal Gear Solid games when it stops the brilliantly designed gameplay to show you half an hour of fucking cutscenes. I don't really like that stuff. And I actually did quite like the Phantom Pain, just for the reason that it didn't have as many excruciatingly long cutscenes in it. But then again, that game was kind of half finished because Konami were trying to like shut the project down towards the end. Anyway, yeah, Death Stranding. I am going to reserve passing any more judgment on Death Stranding until I actually see the game. But yeah, pretension was dialed up to 11 on that one, so colour me cynical. What's next? Resident Evil 7. Riding on the back of the cancelled PT, Resident Evil 7 has a playable teaser itself, which is a first-person walk around a house like PT. I played it. It was okay. It wasn't in the remotest bit scary, but it was in every way better than Resident Evil 6, so I guess we can't really complain. That's basically all I have to say about Resident Evil 7 now, until we see the actual game. I'm wondering if the actual game is going to be first person. I hope it's not. Resident Evil should kind of play to its own strengths and not try and completely reinvent itself. They showed a new God of War, which I'm not a fan of God of War anyway, but this one is like, they've taken the strongest part of God of War, which is the fast combo-based third-person action. They've taken that, they've removed that, and they've locked that in a cupboard somewhere, and they have injected the slow walking beside someone and talking stuff I was talking about just before from like The Last of Us, and they've put that into God of War. And so what we're left with now is Kratos with a huge beard and a little boy teaching his little boy to hunt, and his little boy failing to hunt, and me failing to keep my attention focused on the gameplay demonstration because it was so boring. The only thing that I'm actually interested in about that is that it's now in Norse mythology rather than like ancient Greek mythology or whatever. And that's cool because I love Norse mythology. But nah, not really interested in that, not going to play that. That's basically E3. I'm going to wrap this up soon, but there are a couple of other things I wanted to very quickly talk about. So Necropolis from Harebrained Schemes has just landed on Steam to very lukewarm praise, I've got to say. It's really dividing people, but most people are saying it's kind of not all that fun. Less than the sum of its parts. It's kind of touted as like Spelunky meets Dark Souls. I was really interested in this and I was going to buy it, but I'm not so sure now. I want to learn more about it before I make that decision, but you may see something about that on my channel quite soon. Minor Key Games, who I'm very fond of, the guys who did Eldritch and Neon Struct, they've shown off some of their new one, which is forthcoming. It's going to be out towards the end of this year, I believe. It's called Slayer Shock. I'm assuming that the title is sort of an homage to System Shock and Bioshock, but Slayer Shock is basically like a sort of semi-procedural mission-based first-person shooter where you are a vampire hunter in rural America. So it's kind of like part Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and part Buffy the Vampire Slayer and part like System Shock. And that looks and sounds awesome to me. It has the very sort of minimal style of graphics from things like Eldritch and Neon Struct, but it's not voxel based anymore. It's now like procedural, like building generation and that kind of thing. It looks like their biggest project to date, and it looks super fun, and I'm definitely going to be playing that on my channel as soon as it's out. And another one that I'm going to be playing as soon as it's out, which is in about a week from now, is We Happy Few, which everyone is probably aware of because it's getting a lot of hype in the same way as like No Man's Sky or whatever. It's like a procedurally generated survival run set in England in the 60s when everyone is like drugged up on happy pills apart from you, and they're like, where they all have crazy clown face paint on, and they're like chasing you down the street with baseball bats and stuff. That's basically all I've got to say about that, other than that it has an amazing graphical style. I don't really know what to expect, but I'm definitely playing it in a week from now, and I'm definitely going to be playing it on my channel, so look out for that. What else? Yes, we aren't long away from getting Deus Ex Mankind Divided. What with that being a first-person immersive sim like Deus Ex System Shock, that kind of thing, I will be playing that. I have to be honest though, I'm not the hugest fans of Eidos Montreal. I did like Deus Ex Human Revolution quite a lot, but let's not forget that Eidos Montreal are responsible for raping and murdering the Thief franchise, which is one of my absolute favourite franchises of all time. That game that they did in 2014, which we don't talk about, which begins with T and ends with HIEF. Yes, can't really forgive or forget that easily. So we'll be playing Deus Ex Mankind Divided, but with a degree of ambivalence and sort of, I'm going to be a little wary of it. I'm sure it's going to be very good, but if I had the choice of which franchise they raped and murdered over Thief and Deus Ex, I would have chosen Deus Ex. But, one thing I didn't actually say when I was rambling about Dishonored 2 is it's nice that there are some game developers out there these days who can actually pay decent tribute to the Thief games. Dishonored 2, Corvo and Emily are fully voiced, and Corvo is voiced by Stephen Russell, who voiced Garrett in the three Thief games. Of course, the other one, the one that we don't talk about, didn't have Stephen Russell as the voice of Garrett. It had the guy who plays Ezio's father in Assassin's Creed 2 as the voice of Garrett. The reason they gave for that was because, if you can believe this, Stephen Russell is too old to do the motion capture for Garrett, so therefore he couldn't do the voice acting. Yes, you heard me right. He couldn't do the voice acting because he was too old to move around. How very peculiar. Anyway, as you can tell, I'm still bitter about that. Stephen Russell, though, yes, you'll probably know him, if you don't know who he is, if you didn't play Thief, you'll know him as the voice of Nick Valentine from Fallout 4. He was also the voice of Codsworth in Fallout 4. He was the voice of Belethor and Mercer Frey and a load of other people in Skyrim. And he is going to be doing voices for a game called Zed, I think it's called, which is like by the Myst developers. And he is going to be voicing a very, very important character in Underworld Ascendant. So it's very exciting stuff indeed. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling now as I'm starting to lose my voice. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a comment, let me know what you think. Any feedback, positive or negative, is very greatly appreciated. I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to be doing another episode, but I will definitely be doing one in the future. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care, and goodbye.